Where do you want me to start? Which
Let's
team?
Talk Clemson.
Let's talk
Clemson.
Clemson? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Dom, what do you remember about your father?
What do we remember about 2020? I'm not going to play that every time, I promise.
I was going to say. So my big picture, Clemson, as somebody who did not deep dive this program and this roster or whatever, is that top to bottom, they're better than everybody, that they have a promising physical specimen at quarterback in DJU, Big Cinco, I think is what you told me his nickname is.
Big Cinco.
Yeah. That they constantly develop receivers because of Dabo's background and ability to scout and develop there, that they, I think James Skalski's back, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, for like a ninth year. And that they're able to pay and retain coaching talent better than a lot of teams on their level nationally. And Brent Venables is now the highest paid assistant in the country. And that they've recruited well enough, even though if it's not exactly on the Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia level, that they're still leaps and bounds. And any vulnerabilities are just sort of reaching for a vulnerability.
It's
considering their schedule. Yeah.
It's splitting hairs. They went 10-2 a year ago. One loss on the road in a game that they could have easily won against Notre Dame with a backup quarterback, and the other in the playoff against Ohio State. And they jumped out to an early lead. They ended up getting drilled after that. But once again, just an embarrassment of riches, ridiculous depth across the board for this team. You're going to see some new faces this year. I just you reach a point with Clemson where you kind of don't know what else to say. I think fans would say that last year they were underwhelmed by the offensive line. They didn't get as much production out of the running game as they would have liked, but you can kind of counter that with the fact that Travis Etienne was a little bit more active as a pass catcher out of the backfield. Yeah. They gave up a lot of big plays. And I think that's something that they would obviously look to tighten up. But you're really, as you said, zeroing in on things that you're trying to find something wrong with the team that doesn't have a whole lot wrong with it. They have recruited exceptionally well.
And it's only wrong, by the way. It's only wrong if there's somebody good enough to take advantage of it. Otherwise, it's just another thing.
Exactly. So Clemson had a very good year. They made it to the playoff. It did not work out the way they hoped for in Trevor Lawrence's final year on campus. But nonetheless, a very successful campaign. I think that goes without saying. As we look forward now into 2021, what's the appeal?
I'm one of those boys that appreciates a fine body regardless of the make.
A fine body regardless of the make, Dan.
Yeah.
So the appeal for me is that this is a new era of Clemson and the offense without Trevor Lawrence, who leaves as the winningest quarterback in program history. It's a new era without Travis Etienne, who is the ACC's all-time leading rusher. The question is, what names are going to emerge on offense? Yeah. We already know about Big Cinco, DJU. We know that Justyn Ross, thankfully, is coming back from injury. He's going to lead a very young receiving corps.
By the way, is DJU a sure thing to you? And that's not a leading question. I have no idea. I'm sure you watch. I mean, you remember the Notre Dame game, which was his most extensive action. But, given his recruiting profile, given his size and abilities and arm strength and baseball background, et cetera, does he seem... I mean, Trevor Lawrence came in as like a unique thing as a quarterback recruit. But is it a foregone conclusion that DJU is going to be this year or soon thereafter an All-American quarterback?
I think he's a sure thing, but let me tell you what's not a sure thing. He's a big kid. I would think he could withstand the rigors of playing quarterback, especially behind a really sound offensive line. This is a good offensive line. Mm-hmm. The problem is that if he gets hurt, there's zero depth behind him.
Yeah.
We're quite literally in walk-on territory because their normal backup popped an Achilles in the spring game. It's just a bunch of walk-ons beyond him. So
it hasn't traditionally been great before last year.
No.
I mean, if you remember the Chase Bryce very brief experiment, you were they lose to Syracuse with the backup situation a few years ago. It has been a tenuous room in terms of depth.
It's going to be a question, and I mentioned this on the last show. I don't root for anybody to get hurt. You don't either.
Of course not.
I don't mind the fact that this question is going to be asked, I would assume repeatedly, of Dabo Swinney, given his stance on the transfer portal. He's not big on it. So DJU needs to stay healthy.
There's the other elephant in the room too, as well, which is key players may miss time because of COVID. It is still a possibility, thing, depending on vaccination status. Absolutely.
It is absolutely still a thing. Hopefully not as much as it was last year, but
yeah, fingers crossed.
Look, you can craft a scenario in which Clemson isn't a world beater if DJU goes down. I'm not counting on that. I don't want that to happen. But
of course,
that is really a big deal, that depth issue at the quarterback spot. Otherwise, look, the defense is 9 starters back. They're going to be really, really talented up front. It's a who's who of top-level recruits from the last 3 to 4 years leading this defense. Should be dominant against an ACC slate. The big selling point outside of the DJU thing and outside of all the returning talent and trying to find new faces, and it's that week 1 game against Georgia. It's a monster game. Monster game. They play in Charlotte. It looms incredibly large. The good thing for Clemson is that the schedule outside of that Georgia game is pretty much the second weakest in the ACC.
Right.
They're 72nd nationally in terms of strength of schedule, which means that I think in all likelihood, as long as they don't get blown out in that Georgia game, which isn't going to happen, they could still lose and make the playoff. That seems a near probability to me because I don't see anyone else in the conference really mounting that serious a charge against these guys.
Totally.
So, speaking of the road ahead.
I live my life a quarter mile at a time.
Open up against Georgia and Charlotte. That's the big one. After that, it's pretty much smooth sailing. If you're looking for landmines...
Hold on, I'm going to clip that audio. Sorry. Smooth sailing. Put some Christopher Cross under that when we make it a social clip after they lose to somebody like Pitt or NC State. Continue.
If you're looking for landmines, you have to take a super duper optimistic view of a team like a Pitt or Florida State or NC State, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, or maybe even South Carolina to close out the year. But again, you got to take a real super optimistic view to craft a scenario outside of DJU going down where one of those teams can jump up and get Clemson. The NC State game is on the road, so perhaps there's a chance there. There is some fairly recent history of NC State giving Clemson a game, but in Carter Finley. But it's tough for me to find that scenario. I think Clemson is going to go unbeaten through the ACC. They're going to win the ACC, and they're going to go back to the playoff again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think anything short of losing to Georgia 28-3 and then making their way through the ACC, and even then, if they finish 12-1, it's not going to be a great loss. But outside of that, it's very difficult. You're right. Outside of a key injury, to find the case and construct the case for Clemson being challenged within this conference. Maybe if Mackenzie Milton is completely lights out and that defense would transfer to Florida State, whatever, we'll get there. But there's the ifs are in bold black type.
Big time.
And
italicized, that's underlined, you name it, with the little, the little asterisks around it. Like,
yes. There's also it's the I and the F have a bunch of space, like you're an 8th grade book report writer, where you're just like you got to stretch to get it to 3 pages.
It's just we've seen this before, where Clemson has a very dominant defensive line, and teams can't get past that, and the defense is going to eat a lot of teams up, a lot of opponents up.
Was it Myles Murphy and Bryan Bresee?
Bresee, yes.
Bresee, yeah.
They've got 2 freshmen and 2 sophomores along that line, so it's a very young line. It's very dominant, and I really feel like that gives them such a competitive advantage. Teams just cannot contend with that. There are some good lines in the ACC this year, but not good enough to contend with that kind of star power on the defensive side. And, there are other stories along the depth chart offensively, like can Joseph Nagata be a deep play threat? Can they get more of a...
Aju?
Right. Can they get they didn't have last year the scenario in which somebody could just go up and get a jump ball from Trevor Lawrence the way that I think they're accustomed to. They need to add that back into the game. Maybe Justyn Ross or Nagata can give them that. Man.
But that'd be such a great story if he bounces back.
But these are all, again, splitting hair types of things. What's in the tank?
Amateurs don't use nitrous oxide. I've seen the way you drive. You got a heavy foot. You'll blow yourself to pieces.
It's 10 or 12 wins. It's 10 to 12 wins. In all likelihood, 11 or 12.
Is a 10-2 season a failure for Clemson?
No,
I think yes.
It is.
I think yes.
By recent measure, yes. But I think there is enough turnover with, again, the best quarterback in your program's history walking out the door that you can justify 2 losses. 1 to Georgia, one along the way. Yeah, I think it's entirely okay if that happens. Maybe not by fan standards, but from afar, yeah.
Oh, I mean, if they lose 2 games, that means they're losing to somebody far beneath them if Clemson's at full strength, right?
I think it's okay this year. I think it's okay. I would be willing to accept it this year because of Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, some others walking out. But it's just hard for me to see that happening given the strength of this defense.
Man, it's the position DJU is in following Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, we had the Kelly Bryant intermission,
no pressure,
but who still made the playoff, right? Kelly Bryant made the playoff with Clemson. So
he did.
Yeah, there's a ton of pressure. I think he's going to be a fantastic talent. He seemed to be, and understandably so, last year against Notre Dame. He threw for a ton of yards. He's big body. There was still a rawness to his game.
There was a rawness.
I want to see how seasoned he looks with a full real off season.
They worked a lot on his footwork. They worked a lot on his throwing motion.
Right.
All the usual stuff that you hear about year in and year out with quarterbacks in the offseason, but they're really trying to fine tune his game. And look, to come in and do what he did in 2 games, to throw for 400 yards on the road at Notre Dame as a true freshman, that's pretty damn good.
Right.
Like there aren't that many questions that we have about him at this point that that weren't answered in the limited action we saw last year.
Yeah. And the home run ability of this offense, I think, should still be strong, but the best of Travis Etienne was such a luxury where you give him 10 feet and he's gone. You give him 3 feet and he's taking 14 yards. So a home run luxury that I don't think they have, but it'll be interesting to see which of these guys, a very talented backfield room, steps up and can sort of approximate at least some of what Travis Etienne was.